So what we're talking about today is project management and project administration. So for the purposes of today's discussion, when I say project administration, I really mean kind of the basics of project management. So developing a plan, tracking issues, resources, risks, all those things that are associated with project management. More of the reporting side of project management. And when I talk about project execution, what I really mean there is being the guy who rolls up his sleeves, helps solve problems. He's a part of each conversation. He's really the driver that's pushing that project forward. And you can tell when you're a project administrator or a project executor on each project. I think you know. I think most people know. That they're an administration role. They know that they're doing an awful lot of reaching out to folks, help me understand the status on this, tell me why this is happening, what would happen if this doesn't work. If you're asking those types of questions, you're probably an administrator. It's starting to sound like Jeff Fox right now. When you're an executor, you really don't have to ask those questions. You know what's happening because you're in the middle of all of those, and you can probably do a status report 80% of the problem. It's basically what we're talking about today, and I'll tell you that I've seen a bit of a trend, at least in the financial industry, towards project administration, and I'm really not sure why. I've got a couple different ideas, and I think we're going to explore them a little bit today. We talk a little bit about the differences, how to move from an administrator to an executor, what are the barriers from that, what's the value for it. Make sense? Sound good? All right. Next one, please. So I'm going to start with a quote from Peter Drucker. I think most of you are probably familiar with Peter Drucker, his work. He was he's an Austrian management consultant, was an Austrian management consultant. He's famous for, or one of the things he's famous for is management by objective. And if you're not familiar with that concept, it basically means that executive management provides basically a set of steps, objectives they want to manage to in a specific order. Sound familiar? Oh, kind of like project management, isn't it? If you have the opportunity to read some of his work, it is good stuff, so I do recommend it. But look at this quote, and then think about it in your day-to-day lives. If my job is to be an administrator, and I get a request for an update, maybe it's a regular request, maybe it's an ad hoc request, someone on the executive team needs to know what's happening with something. If I'm an administrator, I pick up the phone, or I send an email, or I call a meeting, or I do whatever, and I say, hey Dave, what's going on with that? And Janet, what's going on with that? And help me understand this, and what are the implications, and what do I do if, and what's the contingency? And then I write all that stuff down, and I put it in an email, or I put it in a pretty template, and I shoot it out to whoever wants it, and I did a good job. It's great, there's value to that. It depends on the organization you're in, it depends on the kind of role you want to play. But I'm more on the side of, if you can do that yourself, if you can figure it all out yourself, if you come out there and say, this is the conversation we have, this is why it's important, this is the impact of this, and this is what you need to be aware of, and hey, there's probably a decision coming up, that's really a more valuable conversation. All right. Yeah, that's where I'm headed. That's what I'm thinking. But like I said, I'm seeing that trend towards administration. Next one, please. So what do we do all day? What do you do all day? That's a nice dashboard, isn't it? You stole it off the internet. So I do think it's pretty. I do like it. It's a good communication tool. When I talked about administration, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I schedule meetings. I develop plans. We do all those things. I do status reporting, or maybe I spend a bunch of time in one of those systems where you need to update the, we have a portal. We have this portal. I'm going to talk a lot about this project we're working on because, bless you, driving me crazy. We have this portal, and the portal is where we put all our status updates, and seems like 30 seconds I get an email on the portal, which is great, and I know it's an aggregator, it's a great place to keep your information, but are we really doing what we should be doing? Are we really adding the value we could be doing? Issue tracking, taking names, taking dates. So let me ask this question. Does this represent 80% of your time? How many people say no? We got one no. We got one solid no. What do you spend most of your time doing, if you don't mind asking?
Most of my time is on the project executor side, and I do the project administration side when I have time.
Okay. Great, we're going to talk some more. What's your name?
Lois.
Lois?
Yeah, it gets done. It just gets done.
That's probably the
On
right
weekends and nights?
Yeah. Exactly.
Probably a 50% administration and 50% execution right now. I don't have someone to update trackers or update. I'm the single central source, one-stop shopping for if there's a question on the project, they come to me.
Oh, that's pretty good.
What I do like is the fact that because I'm engaged in these conversations, 80% of the time I don't need to pick the phone up, but there's that 20%. I can't know everything. So
Right. So you guys are probably more on the execution side. I don't know what the right mix is, honestly. I mean, I think it's dependent. I think each project's different. I think it's dependent on the organization. It's dependent on the executive you're working for. It depends on what you're trying to solve for.
And the size of the project.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if it's a heavy technology where you've got one developer or two developers and they're trying to figure something out, there's really not an awful lot I can do unless I write code. But if you're in a project that's more of a people process tools type of solution, it's a lot broader than a single piece of functionality. Hopefully you're a little more on the execution side.
And I think because of that 50% of this, I can't manage as many projects.
Absolutely.
Whereas I should execute 3 or 4 or 5, add 3 more projects, we can execute more projects, but I gotta do paperwork.
You should get an head on it. Absolutely. We go to the next one, please. All right, so I'm going to go down the list here. And like I said a second ago, it's really going to vary our project, right? Each project's going to be different. There's going to be some projects where you're strictly to the left. There's going to be some projects where you're strictly to the right. But here's a few ways to kind of figure out what role am I playing in my organization. If you don't already know, if you haven't figured it out by now, we'll go through and we'll play a little game. Firstly, do I understand the overall vision of this and this related projects? Are you the kind of person that understands, or do you know what's going on and why you're solving for it? Now, I want to dig into this one a little bit because I've had this conversation before with folks, and I had asked, well, what are you solving for? And I had somebody say to me, we're implementing a new imaging system. I said, super. Why? Because we bought a new imaging system. So we gotta put it in. What are you really solving for? What were the gaps in the old imaging system? Why did we move to the new imaging system? What's the value that's going to bring to the operation? Is there going to be a financial lift? Is there going to be a process lift? Is there going to be a time lift? Understand what you're doing. Versus, do I need help tying all the pieces together? Does somebody need to tell me why this is important? Am I capable of leading the team through project goals, expected outcomes, etc.? Do I know what we're trying to solve for? Big picture, do I get it? Do I know why it's right or why it's wrong? Or are the project goal discussions better left to a project sponsor? If you guys have ever seen me speak before, you may remember my saying what I think, my own personal perspective of what I think great project management is. And to me, great project management is taking a vision that someone has, an executive or someone, and breaking it down into the manageable parts, finding the right people to associate those parts, assign those parts, guide them through their work, and when you get to the end, you bring it all back together, and you put it back into this package that you intended to create. And did it solve that problem up there, or the problem as that problem evolved, as you learned more, or did it not? Do you get that? Do you see how it all works? To me, that's really the value of project management, being that field general, being the guy on the ground to help solve problems and move things forward, taking ownership. That's what I mean by that. Third one down, do I fully understand the impact of the project on the business? Do I know how the business is going to change, or do I need my partners to tell me what will change and why? And I don't mean nuanced stuff. We're not all going to be experts. Project managers aren't supposed to be experts. So I'm not going to be a technology expert. I'm not going to be a super detailed process expert. But I should really understand how it's going to change their work. I should understand what they're doing differently. I should understand the impact. And hopefully I've got an idea. I'm able to measure that. We'll get to that a little bit later too. This one's my favorite one. Can I offer process technology solutions on my own? Or am I dependent upon the business or IT to provide me solutions? I think this one's a key one. And we're going to talk about solutions, intelligent solutions versus educated solutions in a little bit. But am I aware enough? Am I educated enough? Am I thinking in a way that I can come up with creative solutions that people can understand them and jump on board with them? Do they make sense? Do they help overcome objections? Am I still moving things forward? I'll tell the story now. I've got a project, an imaging project that we're working on right now, and I've got an IT business partner who just loves to drag his feet. Loves it. Every time we have a meeting, there's a bunch of questions, and you're going to have to go out and get me this until I can figure out, before I can come with anything further. And it starts with the number of images, and then it says, well, the size of the images, and then how many databases, and then where in those databases are these things stored, and what's the file type. And the questions always come out slowly. It's never just, here's everything I need to know, find this for me, and we'll move forward with it.
Wally and Dilbert.
Hmm?
Wally and Dilbert.
Yeah. Exactly. The struggle that we're getting to there is that we're really kind of trying to drag this guy along and keep him moving forward. And having that kind of driving attitude, having that overcoming of objections, here's a solution that could solve that problem, here's another solution to solve that problem, it keeps the conversation going. And even if he's saying, no, that won't work, it's better than dead air, right? Do I need to ask my business partners for updates on status, or can I develop my own status? I think we already talked about that one. If you're involved in the conversation, you know most of it. And am I adding overall value to the effort, or do I cost the team time, energy, effort? Am I spending my time calling the operations folks and saying, hey, explain this to me? Or where are we on this? Or am I a part of it? Am I taking stuff off their plate? Am I able to kind of add value to the overall effort and make their life easier? When they walk away from the project at the end, are they like, oh, that was great? Or are they saying, I'm so tired of working with that guy? Jump to the next one, please. Thank you. So, why are we headed this way? I thought a lot about this. I don't know that I really know. I think there's a couple big picture reasons. One, executive need visibility. As I mentioned on that one project that we're working on, the PMO in capital letters, their one customer is the executive team. So the executive team needs to report. The executive team needs to put something together for the board. The executive team needs to know where this work stream is. That's their one single customer. So it does put the execution side, which is the side that I lead, puts us in a bad position because we're spending an awful lot of time with status reports and we're really not spending as much time doing what we need to be doing in the execution space. Executive team is single source. So it's a lot easier for the executive team to go to our administrator than to, I don't know, 30, 40 different project managers. And also understand that going to that single administrator and that person who understands how to give a report, if you do a good job at it, you're giving them the right things. One little pet peeve of mine is when folks put on their status reports that we had a meeting. Hope so. Hope you're not doing it on your own. It's kind of like saying I drove to work this morning. So there's that normalization of those status reports, and that's definitely valuable. Line of business wants control over their operations. This is an interesting one. I think this is really organizationally dependent. I worked in organizations where the line of business owner basically been like, here, take it, go, do what you got to do, let me know when you're done. I've been in other organizations where it's almost like I'm interrogating a ISIS agent. I can't get anything out of them. So we're probably closer to the latter than the former in this particular example. But a lot of times you'll run into leaders that just, look, you don't know my business. You don't know what you're talking about. Just let me do what I need to do, and I'll give you your updates, or I'll let you in on this so far. That's a little challenging. If anybody's got any ideas on that, please let me know. So the fourth one down, there's a lot going on. So you were saying a second ago, I can only handle so many projects, right? And if I've got a design deliverable that needs to be produced on a regular basis, and I know I need to get that done, and if I don't get that done, I know I'm going to get a slap on the wrist. What am I going to do? I'm going to produce my deliverable. I'm going to check my boxes. I'm going to produce my status reports. What suffers? All the other stuff. Being involved in the actual solution. And then this last one. So this is kind of a self-reflection one. Right? Can I really be trusted? Can we really be trusted? I think that, I'll tell you that I personally think I know more than I do. You got to be a little bit careful sometimes in where you want to play. Right? I mean, is this the right spot for me to play or not? And I'll tell you this, personal weakness, I'm not a super technology guy. If things get too complicated in there, I'm probably the wrong guy to be telling anybody how to do anything. Right? I'm more of a process person. How things flow back and forth, the movement of different bones or whatever, that's probably more in my wheelhouse. So I think it's one of those ones where you really need to say to yourself, do I really know enough about this topic that I should really insert myself and be involved here? Do I leave this to the experts and facilitate? What should my role be in this particular case? And it's case by case.
Don't you think that a lot of what's driving this, though, is cost? I mean, in dollars. I mean, I'm used to having a project manager manage multiple projects, and typically they'd have a project administrator on each of the projects, so that you can leverage the expertise, but you're still saving money on the lower value-added work. I mean, I don't think it's all ulterior motive. I think there's a lot of just, how can I get the most out of my project manager?
So absolutely, I will say that I think that feels like a more mature environment than the environment I'm working in. Very immature. It's probably a 1 on a capability maturity model. This particular organization. So they really don't know what to do with the project manager. The role is different based on whoever the executive is. So in that particular instance, yeah, probably. It's probably a good use of the role too, right? Yeah. All right, is that all there is? So So we talked a little bit about what execution is, basically the differences between the two.
It's okay. Really good slides, thank you, Phil.
So is that all there is? No, not really. I mean, if you're a really solid executor, if you really know how to add value, if you really know where to jump in, where to step back, where to call in additional resources, if you're good at that, you're going to see more investment and accountability for the business results in the outcome. As a project manager, you're an owner. You're part of it. You want to see this thing succeed. As a matter of fact, if you make that commitment, you're going to see it succeed. That's one of the great things about being deeply involved in a project. Not just the visibility, but the meaning and the impact. It's like I talked about with that status report a while back. I'm involved, I understand these impacts, I understand the implications of it. If I'm thinking the right way and I've thought enough about this, I can have a much more informed conversation than Fred is going to develop this code, it's going to be done by Friday, and it's going to go into the test by Monday. It's kind of, it's great, it's black and white. Truly a single source of all information, not just an aggregator. Again, that's that kind of that 80% rule. Support for the operations. So this goes back to that statement I made a while ago about the operations either wanting or not wanting to work with you. There's organizations, organizational structure, and then there's individuals. And as an individual, individuals can create their own reputations. They're known as value-added resources or not value-added resources. What would be great is to take a bunch of folks, a team, and get the organization to shift into that thinking that everyone's a value-added resource and everyone has this certain responsibility, and then give them the opportunity to get in there and make an impact. It gives you the chance to ask all the questions, give a little third-party perspective, and you become more of an owner and a driver of the project. You're more invested. Next one, please. All right, so can I change all this? So if I'm operating an organization that's used to project administrators, and I want to be a project manager, can I make it happen? The short answer is I don't know. That's a hard one, for me at least. There's going to be some factors that are going to affect it, right? First is really your corporate culture. So from a corporate culture, and I mentioned a second ago, my corporate culture has no idea what to do with a project manager. You're a business analyst, you're an administrative assistant, you write requirements, or you give status reports. You really don't know what your job is, and depending on who you are and what the problem is and who else is a resource on the team, maybe you'll be doing some impactful work, maybe you won't. There's other corporations that are a lot more advanced, and in those particular cases, you have a very narrow box that you work in. I've worked in a few organizations that have a very defined process. One of them in particular, which I won't mention the name of it, has a very, very strong governance process where after every little while, I guess it was a couple months or so, I would have to go meet with someone from the PMO, and the PMO would audit my project. And the audit consisted of, did you do this deliverable, and when did you do it? Did you do this deliverable, and when did you do it? And the answer was, yeah, sure, I did it. They never really looked at the deliverables themselves. So my favorite story about that was that I got a phone call from the guy who was auditing my project was, I might have been 23. I got a call from not his mom, his manager. So his manager called me, he goes, hey Phil, we went through this audit process and you missed a deliverable. And I said, yeah, I know I missed it, but downstream I've got a couple other deliverables. They do answer the questions that are in that particular template. What do you think? I feel like we're good. And she said, no, you're not good. You should probably do that. So she received an email 7 minutes later with that deliverable. And she didn't look at me. Yeah, I'm sure it was good stuff. I'm sure it was probably the best work of my career.
You get it? You get that?
Got the check, though. They got the check mark.
I did get my check. Yeah, I got my check in the box. Got a gold star. So, organizational maturity. So, and we talked a little bit about this. Do organizations know how to use this role? What's the philosophy behind the role? And the philosophy doesn't have to be my philosophy, right? It could be somebody else's philosophy. It doesn't make it right or wrong. But it is a philosophy. This is what the expectations are. And we're probably going to talk about personal choices in a little while, too. Do I want to be in an organization where this is the expectation of the role versus other organizations where I've got a little more room to grow? Team roles, same thing. So it depends on what team you're on. I've operated on teams that have been very administration focused, and I've also operated on teams that have been about strategic initiatives and solving problems. And sometimes they're in the same organization. Typically, they're different leaders. Typically, if you've got a leader that understands the vision behind project management, where the value is, typically they like to see that across the organization. But experience is, I'll tell you the execution's a lot more fun. Here's your manager's preference. So how do they want you to work? Your management team is like I said in our integration project, the management team is really, I'm looking for status. This is what I need from you. So this is your job, fill that job, and you'll make me happy. Business partner expectations. Again, how much is the business partner, how much help is the business partner willing to accept? Do they want you in? Are they going to open the doors? Or are they a little more concerned with, do you represent risk, or what's the challenge associated with your being involved? And then the last one, again, individual skills and ability. Can you add more value? Like I said, in some cases, I'm not the right guy to be telling you how to do what to do. So another little interesting story about all of this culture change. And culture change it's a much bigger topic than what we're talking about today, but I felt like this was valuable because I wanted to share it. There was some research done in the University of Illinois in the late 70s. And the concept was around culture change and changing folks' attitudes towards certain things. So the individual researcher happened to choose the topic of getting children to eat vegetables, particularly vegetables they didn't like. And one of the ways that they took the approach was to just tell kids, look, vegetables are good for you, they're going to be great, you're going to love it, you'll learn to like them. The other way that they took was that if you eat all your vegetables, you're going to eat all the ice cream you want, and that'll work. Neither of those things worked at all. But has anybody heard about this study?
No, but it sounds very apropos.
Yeah, so I'm going to connect the dots in a second. So the way that what did work is they sat one child who liked that particular vegetable at a table with several children who didn't like that vegetable. And every meal that kid was just eating those vegetables. And what happened is after a little while, all the other kids started eating the vegetables too. So basically the conclusions that came out of the study was that peer pressure is the best motivator of corporate change. And the nicest thing about this is that it is very, very relative, because if you think about kind of the maturity level of children and corporate executives, they really do. So, next one, please. All right, so here's some ways to be execution focused. There's 7 of them here. We're going to talk about each one of these individually. So I got my guy Indiana Jones on there, which big fan of Indiana Jones. I don't know if anybody's a big fan of this movie.
Coming out with new ones.
Yeah, I'm
He's
scared.
75 years old.
I'm scared.
I'm wondering if he's going to come out in a wheelchair with his broken leg.
Yeah, what did he, I don't know. I'm nervous. I am. I'll admit, I'm nervous about the new one. I like the first one. I like the third one. The second one was okay. Fourth one, yeah. So, but anyway, Indiana Jones is the ultimate execution-focused guy to me. And you guys remember the scene in the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's in the desert and they kidnap the girl and she's in a truck someplace and he goes after her and then the guy steps up with a sword and does the whole thing and whatever and pulls the guy out. So clearly, execution-focused. I'm solving a problem. This is great. Boom, done. But there's actually a story behind that I'm going to tell you, which is a little bit gross. So the way that scene was originally written was that Indiana Jones was going to get a sword, and there was going to be a big sword fight, they're going to run around and do a bunch of crazy stuff. Well, they've been on location for several months. The location was hot, it was desert, there were flies flying around in people's faces, it was terrible. And Harrison Ford evidently came down with a case of dysentery. He was not feeling well, he wanted to get out of there, he wanted to go back to his trailer, he wanted to do whatever. So the recommendation was, hey, instead of doing this long sword fight, can I pull a gun and end it? And based on that interaction with Steven Spielberg and how that scene happened to play, it happens to be one of the most famous scenes in the movie. But it was an ad hoc rewrite. Next slide, please. All right, so the first one, who is your customer? Know your customer. So this is interesting. I told you a few times that our PMO, and just to give you guys some kind of perspective on it, we're merging 2 organizations. The organization that we bought is bigger than ours. So there's an awful lot of work that's going to go into bringing these 2 things together. We're really taking the organizations down to the studs. We've got, from the PMO side, we've got an administration side, and then we've got an execution side. And like I said, my team's on the execution side. The administration side does a lot of work in giving the executive team what they need. So their sole job is really just to report. The challenge that we're running into is, for a while, we were very, very close-knit merged groups. So we get an awful lot of questions from the administration side, because they were trying to solve one problem, which was visibility for the executive team. We're trying to solve another problem. We're trying to manage projects. So visibility is an output of being able to effectively manage projects. So we had a lot of moving and shifting until we got to a point where we did understand ourselves a little bit better. But here's the point all he saw as his customers was the executive leadership team, and that was it. Whereas our customers are just about everybody else, really, right? So we've got executive leadership, we've got our business partners. If we have customers and we're doing customer experience, the actual customers, I can't forget about those guys. Then you've got IT and finance and legal. I guess the point that I'll make is that if you're an execution project manager, everybody's your customer. Everybody. And when you're treating customers, you want to treat customers well, and you want customers to come back. Well, what do? You add value for them, right? I mean, unless you're the DMV, you have to come back. You want it to be a pleasant experience. You want them to want to come back. So what and how do you make them come back? You solve their problems. You add value to what they're doing. You make their lives a little bit easier. You make somebody's life a little bit easier, they're going to want to work with you. Next one, please. All right, establish yourself as a trusted advisor. So this is a huge one. Project management means a lot of things to a lot of different people, right? And I think that if you were to talk to all your business partners, they probably had great experiences with project managers, terrible experiences with project managers, and everything in between. One of the things that I do coach my team on is this whole concept of building rapport with your team. What can you do to really add value to a project, understand the project? Well, you got to go to the right people. People are going to have to want to share information. They're going to have to want to work with you. So the first thing you really need to do is establish a network. It's not too hard to figure out who the guys are that are really making a difference and killing it, who the subject matter experts are, how they do what they do. It's not that hard to do that. Find out who those guys are, write their names down, set up 15 minutes with them before or after, take them to lunch, whatever you need to do, but establish some rapport with these guys. The second one is something that I call it student-teacher modeling. Maybe it's not the best name I've ever put there anymore. But basically, the concept is as you're having these one-on-one meetings with folks, you start having conversations and you say to them, hey, tell me about your job. What do you do? Why is the organization working against you, and why are you a hero? Tell me about it. And people love to talk about that, interestingly. Why are you a hero? And they tell you why, and they tell you all about the business. I worked on a project in a previous role on appraisals, and I'll tell you I don't know anything about appraisals. I don't know anything about appraisers. I really don't know anything about, I mean, I can get it now, but at the time I didn't know much about it. But I would have them tell me about, well, tell me about the appraisal process. Tell me why each district is different. Tell me why the housing, the folks in the housing authority make such a difference in the value of the house. All those different questions. And I would do that same thing, have that same conversation with everybody that I've established in my network. And then as we're having project meetings, I would go through and we'd talk about these topics, and we would touch on those topics. And I would repeat something that somebody said to me. And I would say, hey, Dave, you said that, right? And Dave's like, yeah, you're right, Phil. That is right. That's what we said. I use Dave a lot. I don't know if there's any Daves in the room. I feel like I keep calling on you. Anyway, so they get used to you repeating back what they say, and they get used to being comfortable that, yeah, he's listening, he understands what's going on, he gets it. They get used to agreeing with you. And then as things start moving forward, you can start throwing ideas out there. And not that they're going to agree with you every time, but they're going to start listening. They're going to know that you listen to them, they're going to listen back for you. It helps really establish that rapport, establish that relationship, and get you to be viewed as someone who's a participant on the team, not just somebody who wants to know, if they're done yet. We talked about rapport already, so I'm going to pass that. We talked about customer perceived value too, right? You want the customers to come back, you need to make their lives easier. How do you create value for each individual? Get to know what's important to them, what they're trying to solve for, and what you can do to solve it for them. I know a lot of project management managers typically discourage project managers from taking on deliverables themselves. I do not. I don't want you to sign everything to yourself. Be fair, and maybe up front take a little more than in the back end, or where you see things that you can actually add value to. But no, I'm a big proponent of what can we do to make it easier. If I have a deliverable to do, or my operations person has a deliverable to do, I don't show up blue sky. I say, hey, let me put a straw man together. I get enough about this that I can give you a kind of a snapshot. Yeah, you're probably going to have to rework it, but at least you don't have to build it from scratch. And then usually you'll get a thank you. It's nice. And I guess that kind of leads to the servant leadership piece too. What can I do to help you do your job? That's what we're here for. We're here for support. At the end of the day, operations makes the money. We're there to support them. Next one, please. All right, so the next one's knowing your business. So how do you know the business? How do you learn the business? One, find your experts, find your SMEs, talk about what they do every day, how they do it. Ask questions and ask intelligently. So we're going to talk a little bit about intelligent questions, but right now I'm just going to talk about asking intelligently, which really to me is find the right time. How many of you guys have been on a call and starting to debate what's going on and how things work, and then somebody raises their hand and says, what's a deferment? Not the right time. That's the kind of thing that you take a note, make a phone call to your manager a little bit later or whatever. But don't interrupt everybody's time, don't derail everybody's time, and don't show everybody that you don't know what you're doing yet. If you still need to figure things out, if you still need to figure some things out, make a note, go back, come back later. Outside research. So I feel like there are times where I need to tell people that there's a thing called the internet. I really do. I'll tell you an interesting story about that. I had a status report one of my team members put together, and went out to another group, and there was an aggregator, and here's a guy who was, wasn't a newer project manager, but he's a little bit of a kind of lower level project manager, and he asked me a question about an audit, a compliance audit that was going on, and this is over email. So I answered what it was, and then he asked, well, what kind of audit? And I told him what it was. It's an SOC1. And then he said, well, what's an SOC1? And I said, well, it's a servicer or something, compliance audit or whatever it might be. Is there a difference between a type 1 and type 2? Finally, I just sent him a bunch of links.
Yep.
Yes, there are. I'm not in Treasury. I don't know this stuff any better than you do. I've been on a few conversations. Google. Man, Google. Save the money. Walk the process. So I know that, I think everyone does this. Most people do this. I personally don't love it. Sitting down next to somebody and watching them do their jobs. I really don't want to be a loan processor. But there is nothing more valuable than sitting next to someone and watching them do their job and watching them use the system and watching the clicks they make and watching the phone calls they make and what's an easy one and what's a hard one. There is nothing more valuable than doing that. There's nothing more valuable than sitting there and taking the time with someone to understand how things are working. A little side benefit too. You're seeing somebody's engaged and committed. You're creating a good vision of yourself. And then this last one here, that go deeper. So I had an executive that I used to work with when I was at, Wells Fargo. I used to work at Wells. And brilliant guy. One of the things that he really drove the team on was this whole idea of going deeper. And I try to incorporate that with my team. And what I mean by that basically is a lot of times we'll have surface level information and we think that's enough because somebody said that's enough. It's really asking the next question and the next question and the next question until you really do understand what we're talking about. It's silly example. Well, how do you make a cheeseburger? Well, I buy a bun and I buy some meat and I throw it in the fryer and then I stick it in the bun and we're done. Okay, well that's how we do it.
You forgot the cheese.
Well, man, we just forget the cheese. But how long do you cook it for? What kind of bread do you buy? What kind of cheese do you buy? Do you put the cheese on while you're cooking, or do you put the cheese on after you cook? Those types of deep dive type questions, which interestingly sometimes they're tough to train, sometimes they're tough to think about, and especially when you're in the middle of one of those conversations that's going quickly, you may or may not want to bring them up, but definitely make notes, definitely reach out to your SME network and understand what you're talking about at that detailed level. Next one, please. All right, understanding expected outcomes. So this kind of goes back to that higher level concept that I mentioned a while ago. We're putting something in place. We know why we're putting it in place. Why is it important? What are we really solving for? What's different about the world because this project is in place? You should really know that and understand it. There's a few methods that are around this, and I strongly encourage to Google these if you're interested in these, because these are a lot deeper concepts than I'm going to go into, but you should understand the difference between the three because it is important. You've got forecasting, and really forecasting is about using past trends to infer the future. So you're looking at the current trends, you're looking at whatever change you may make, and you may want to change that forecast based on, so this is more data-based. It's more of a performance rate type of method. The second one is more scenario building, which is probably a little less accurate. It attempts to predict outcomes by changing the inputs within a scenario, and it typically uses a high, medium, low approach. So on the high end we've got this, on the low end we've got this, somewhere in the middle is about where we expect it to be. And then the third is really speculation, and let's be honest, almost all of this stuff is really speculation, right? We're pretty much guessing. But speculation is based on my 27 years of a operations leader. I haven't been around that long, honestly. Based on my 27 years, this is what I think is going to happen, and usually we go with it. And the challenge with that, because I will tell you that I'm you know, if I were to guess, it's probably 80% of the decisions are made that way, based on gut and experience. Not that that's necessarily all bad, but we don't get a chance to go back and measure in most cases to really understand, did we do a good job? You know, did we really make the right call, or was it really just a self-fulfilling prophecy? I thought it was better, so it's better. I was thinking better. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so I've been leading up to this one. If you've been sleeping all day, this is the one to go with. This is the one slide. So, offering intelligent solutions. So there's an interesting quote. I don't think any presentation would be complete without a Steve Jobs quote. So I had to put one in there, and I do want to read it to you because I found it interesting. Creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. It seemed obvious to them after a while. That's because they were able to connect experiences they've had and synthesize new things. And the reason they were able to do that was that they've had more experiences, or they had more about their experiences, or they had thought more about their experiences than other people. It's really kind of a paradigm shifting thought when you think about it. I think most folks, myself included, think that sometimes there's magic in creativity. You know, there's people out there that you know come up with the iPhone, or they come up with Google, or they come up with these big innovative things that people hadn't really thought about before. And to hear someone who's arguably one of the you know, a pioneer in the 20th, 21st century, to say that it's really just connecting the dots, it's taking your experiences and looking at them a little bit differently. To me, it's motivating as much as it is insightful in how we approach problems. So with that in mind, we've got intelligent solutions. So I do want to create a distinction between an educated solution and an intelligent solution, right? And an educated solution to me is, I know how the business works, I know how the process works, I know how the tools work, so I'm going to make a statement based on my understanding of that. If you look at the top one, I know my business, I know my process, I know my tools, I know my technology. An intelligent solution takes those pieces but blends them with my understanding of the strategy. So I understand the goals that I'm solving for, and then I also understand critical thinking and how to apply or look at things in a way that I can make connections, I can remove bias, I can remove assumptions, and I can really see what I'm looking to solve for and create some connections. I will tell you, and I have done 3 presentations on this one bullet alone. It's one of my favorite topics. It's definitely something that I find very interesting and insightful. So again, that's another thing to Google if you feel like Googling. And here's something else that I share with my team a lot. A great way to establish yourself as an executor and a leader is to lead with ideas. If you're one of those guys that can come up with ideas, intelligent ideas, quickly, you share them with your team, you make them public, you make them known, you've got a better chance of being recognized as a leader in the organization. You're probably going to get better results out of your project, and maybe even out of your career. Next one, please.
Do you think idea people are born, or do you think that you can practice somehow?
You know,
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, some people see a process, like the Japanese, they see our cars, they made them better.
Mhm.
You know, so they improve on a process. Like, because I'm more of an enhancer. I see something, I get in there, I make it better. But I don't come up with the original idea. I just struggle with that.
So to answer your original question, yes and no. I think that there are certain traits that idea people have that not everyone has, and I don't mean anything wrong by that, right?
No.
I mean, so I've been.
Because there's inventors, and then there's people
Right.
that don't invent things.
Absolutely, yeah. There's people that just get stuff, right? I mean, so I've been painfully trying to learn to play the guitar for like the past 5 years, and I'll be honest, if I were to play it right now, I don't think anybody would be able to guess any of the songs, even if I gave you the words. I'm just not a music person, but I've got a friend who is a music person. He's written a ton of songs. He's got a ton of songs published. He wrote a song for a movie. Arguably a successful guy, and he's one of those people that can just play. So I think there's certain things that make give idea people an advantage over most people, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. So I kind of get into it in my actually it's the last slide in my critical thinking presentation. So there's ways to ask critical thinking questions. There are things that will spur you ask the right question and then you get the right answer, now it's choose your own adventure, right? I mean, do I take it left or do I take it right? And I think that has a lot to do with just how your mind works, how you put things together. So I think there are traits. I think you can learn it to some extent, but I think that we're not all going to be Steve Jobs, right?
Right.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, you did.
I feel like I scrolled a little.
You see, sometimes you're born with it, and sometimes maybe you can acquire it.
There's definitely skills to it that you can learn. Absolutely. So driving change. We talked a lot about driving change, but really, I think you know a driver when you see one, right? And I think this is something that you can absolutely learn, is how to drive, right? You know the guy who shows up, you know the guy who's at the meeting, you know the guy who's got a disciplined approach, you know the guy that doesn't stop at no. Like my IT partners, those guys that love to drag their feet. It's not, I'm not gonna wait another week to get you back on the phone to get you to tell me that I need to go find something else. Well, here's a solution, here's a solution, here's a solution. And you're firing fastballs at this guy because you want to get him to understand that I'm not here to play, I've got something I need to get done. And those are habits that anybody can do, right? I mean, if you're I mean, personalities aside, right? Some people aren't super intense, and you don't have to be super intense, but it's helpful. But those are types of habits that people can develop, is being able to drive that change, pushing on the process, understanding really what progress is being made. I will tell you, one of the things that you lose in administration is this whole, Phil, how are you on this task? Oh, I'm at 50% complete. And then I come back the next week and say, Phil, how are you on this task? And I say, I'm 55% complete. Good job. What did you really do? What did you do? So I need to understand your progress. I need to understand what you're doing. What's the incremental change that you made? Did you write one other line of code? Did you put another box on your process map? What are you really doing? So understand the progress as it's made and push on the progress. And then eliminate the unnecessary. So I'm going to complain again. So I spend an awful lot of time in meetings where I have conversations with people who both don't understand the problem and have no ability to impact it. And I will tell you that drives me nuts. So you got a question. So project managers like to pontificate, right? We like to just talk about stuff. And if I get on a phone call and I'm having a conversation and I recognize that, A, we don't understand this issue, B, we really can't affect it, probably not a good conversation. Let's go out, let's at least understand it, understand the impacts of it. Maybe I still can't affect it, and that's okay, but if I understand it and explain it to somebody who can impact it, well, that's a different story. But if none of us can do anything about it, and we really don't quite get it anyway, time to hang up the phone. All right, move to the next one, please. All right, knowing your contributions. So this one, I think, is a style one as well, right? And I think, as people, generally, we try to be humble, we try to be a little modest, and not self-respect others. We try to be humble, we try to not toot our own horns. That's life, that's not your career. If you're working in a project-based organization, you need to support yourself, you need to make sure that management is aware of your contributions, your operations folks are aware of your contributions, what you've done, what you've produced. And the best way to do that is, one, measure. And I will tell you that I'm willing to bet that most of us here in the organizations that we work on can't get a measurement that they would take to the bank where they're absolutely solid, confident, and this is the change that I made. I will tell you that I have never once in my career done something that I was 100% certain of. Most of the time, I think I'm pretty close. And again, that's the nature of the beast, right? A lot of times when we make a change, nobody wants to wait around 3 months to see if you did it right. So let's move on, and I think I did the right thing. So my advice on this one is hang on to it, do some back of the napkin calculations, take your best guess, caveat the heck out of it, right? So yeah, okay, so I don't really know because I didn't really get a chance to observe this, or this is what I thought I saw, but based on our observations A, B, and C, this is what we think we impacted this project by. And the reason that's so important, really, it's one of the drivers that I actually started my career in marketing, and I'm no longer in marketing. One of the reasons I'm no longer in marketing is that it became too speculative for me. I needed a little more data. I needed a little something to back it up. That's what this really does. So when I have a conversation with anybody, whether that project a success? Did the process benefit from it? Yeah, I mean, I think I saw a 25% lift. This is how I measured it. This is where I think it is. That's a much better conversation than, yeah, we did a heck of a job. Feel really good. Less complaints from the team, so we're doing good. So if you can, take the time to do it. The other thing is track your contributions. So I give a lot of advice to the team about that. The way I do my performance reviews with the team is they have certain behaviors that they need to exhibit. It's things like what we talk about. So it's things like critical thinking, and executing to a project, and adding value, and all those things. And they have a little more specific goals. But I ask them to write it down and give me examples. So, hey, I exhibited critical thinking on project X because we were in this situation and I identified that this was it was a perspective and it wasn't a fact, and we solved that problem. So that's what I really encourage, and I encourage the same thing with all of you is in your projects, as you're doing things, as you're making impacts, as you're solving things, write them down, take a little note, and then bring them to somebody's attention. So I have another story about this one. I used to work with an executive at Bank of America, and she was definitely one of these hard-charging drivers. She's really fast-track in the fast-track in her career. She wasn't too much older than I was at the time, and but she was really had a lot of energy. She was really pushing. She was really doing really well for herself. And she gave me some advice one day. She said, "Phil, Bank of America doesn't like quiet leaders. If you think about the environment in the big banks, and really any organization, they're huge. It's really easy to get lost in the shuffle. It's really easy to get swallowed by another group. It's really easy to have everything you've done, washed away like a sandcastle, and you're starting from scratch again. So, if you're interested in your career, you're interested in moving forward, track your contributions, make them known, make sure everybody knows what you're doing and how you're spending your time. All right. Next slide, please. So, yeah. I think the big difference that we really talked about today, and hopefully that we got to some of the points that you guys were looking to hear, is that administration really kind of creates a one-dimensional role for ourselves. And I don't think that's what most of us want. Secondly, I really don't think it's the full value of what a project manager can do. So what I would encourage is try to establish yourself as an executor. And maybe you can use some of these techniques. Maybe there are better techniques out there. Maybe your organization operates differently. But if you're on point, you're the guy who's driving this project to fruition, it's going to help with your project results, and it will probably help with your career. Any questions?